The work is really dealing with controversial and difficult problems, social, urban, historical.
A lot of the projects are really kind of trying to explore unique personal visions of architecture and kind of beyond.
When you enter the building, there's a lot of hope for the future.
Generally, thesis students always take on questions of form and aesthetics. One thing that I found interesting this year is that students have a lot of anxiety about essentially formal excess, and they've tried to very intelligently take on this question with found objects and materials that they can reuse.
Because it's found material, it's not perfect. I would begin by playing with the material and exploring the limitations of it, which ways it liked to bend, which ways it didn't.
The construction industry is using so much non-sustainable materials. We have to rethink what materials do we use.
I think what we're seeing now in thesis is a huge mixture of maybe two different mediums coming together. And sometimes those are material mediums like mud, plaster, mixing with like two different film worlds, physical models at the same time.
Basically, the shunting really kind of pulls some of that material with it and kind of lets the material kind of act as its own. Produces these kind of textures that you're never really designing for.
So I think the materiality, I wanted it to have some warmth and some more tactile elements between something like wood and then concrete, but also trying to weave in this upholstery where you could fully relax a little bit further and feel more at home.
This relationship of maybe bringing queerness into architecture as a kind of material process, that things are temporary, they get reincarnated, they decay.
The reason I pick salt is because its solubility that is able to transform some building materials into ruination. I casted salt onto the building facade and then carefully wash away the salt, expose what's behind it.
Wouldn't it be amazing if all buildings would decay, that you could lick them, that you could rub yourself in their fat, that the building would change and it would have a relationship back to our bodies?
Does the building sweat? Do you start to think about how you produce pores or how you produce sort of edges that start to bubble with water?
One of my students is working with dried flowers, and that's really exciting because he started to dry them out, crush them up, break them again, and then paint them. And so they started to become this new facade and medium across his building.
I think the most important thing in my whole project is the color and the texture. For example, like this side model, I hand painted all those ingredient color for right here because it can reflect the inner world of those dementia peoples. They are in total different resolution, just like our memories.
Sometimes I see a hint of a flower, but then other times it turns into a teapot. And I think it's those things coming together and creating these new shapes and forms that I find really exciting.
I see a lot of students working with models. There is really an urge to fabricate things. For every architecture student, everything that you see, it's made with every tool under the sun.
My thesis project is about intentionally mixing heavy and light tectonic system to build these interventions over the desert ruin of Llano del Rio, turning them into a usable event ground. It's a bit of everything: line drawing, rendering, animation, model, different materials. Everything was on the table.
The ambition to maybe build full scale is an outcome of the post-COVID era. We are in the post-AI era. So the notion of reality is in question in many ways, and sometimes the students respond to that by trying to reconquer the kind of the very physicality of architecture through big models.
This just as a display, as an apparatus of display, I think it does a lot of work of bringing us together in a conversation.
There's a desire to make the conditions out of which a project emerges, to design everything about the way that something comes into existence.
Part of the intention is to try and create the object as a composite of these familiar structures, familiar houses, but also having the representational object perform.
I have one thesis project that was very formal and very aesthetic and very interested in eroticism, the history of that in architecture.
My model is very delicate. I spend a lot of time on the seductive line, the prickling point, and the delicate surface. The curve is seductive. That's how I express the sensuousness of the physical.
There must be moments of putting this together where it is almost erotic.
What is the relevance of the project in the larger conversation around societal issues, politics, identity, climate? If a project can maybe open up to those kind of bigger issues without presuming to answer them like directly, I think that's a really fantastic project.
Instead, we reach homeostasis with the environment through a device unearthed in ancient Antarctica. This device takes no form. Instead, you define it through the narrative, the object, and the replica. The aesthetics are a byproduct of what we have achieved from climate change.
And I think that's what's important about this project, is that it is a place in extreme climate where we're taking ecosystems that cannot be placed there, essentially, and putting them there. What makes Iceland great is just the abundance of energy that it has.
The beekeeper tried to apply paper wax to absorb the bees to create the hives.
The whole question of cohabitation is a big one these days. How do we cohabit the world?
The idea was to combine the landscape with the house while also exploring this idea of transition within the elements within the house and with the exterior of the house.
You create very diverse environments within the house, as I was referring to, microclimates.
Yeah.
And I was thinking a lot about how that could kind of foster different forms of engagement between indoors and outdoors.
The title of my thesis is Matte Fill. On the canvas is an idea of if the pixel farming was implemented at a more of an urban scale. Since my project proposes pixel farming is the use of robots to plants, and I thought it would be nice to also use a robot to run part of the simulations. So the plants take on a personality and they go by their own system and their own understanding of scale. So we have a nice dialogue between our traditional representation and this new one that's beginning to form.
We are having a lot of conversation about artificial intelligence and neural devices today. A lot of those conversations primarily revolve around copyright or jobs. I do believe that AI and neural links and things like this could help us imagine a future more humane.
I designed 6 different Gundam buildings to respond 6 different disasters. I used a Blender to model it, and then I used 3D printing to finish it. The render of these drawings are all from AI rendering. So I must say AI saved my life. It's really easy to do that. Just to give AI a photo and a reference photo and prompt so it can render it like this.
Some of the projects are trying to establish an idea of reality or kind of rediscover some kind of historical idea of reality, but some of them are trying to establish a new reality.
My thesis is about how digital can become physical and how digital materials become physical realities and how people can experience by taking photos and interact with my project. The standout aspect of my project, the color and then the material that is not being seen in physical world, and also how people can naturally interact and have wonderful images to have digital traffics.
My thesis is about a connection between the digital and physical realities. With digital becoming more and more prevalent, I wanted to bring that connection back to physical models and a physical reality. This table simulates Los Angeles, and all of the things are movable, and it updates in real time based on sort of an augmented reality, mixed reality experience. I wanted to move away from virtual reality headsets and phone-based experiences and bring it back into the physical world so that people can really touch it with their hands, and even people who don't have an experience with architecture can interact with architecture in a really meaningful way.
The role of thesis is not to be the kind of end project of your education, but really the starting point.